Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.
Welcome to Deep Pockets with Petra Soderling, the show about government and innovation. I hope you enjoy today's episode and the music created by a New Orleans jazz icon Leroy Jones. Find this and other Leroy Jones tunes wherever you get your music. Between November and March, I had the opportunity to peek into the world of blockchain, specifically how governments use the blockchain technology in various use cases, but I also got a glimpse of the crypto industry and digital assets. I was an early Bitcoin enthusiast when they first arrived, but I haven't really followed that space any longer. I'm now more interested in how the digital finance industry, or I guess we call it the finance industry since everything is now digital, how that affects and shapes our economies, societies, democracies on a macro level. In order for the finance industry, financial transactions, investments, and assets to function as intended, three things need to be in place. They need to be secure, they need to work across the board with other systems. In other words, they cannot be isolated from our other online experiences, and they need to be legal. This sounds pretty straightforward, but in the ever-evolving technology landscape and international regulation space, the devil is in the details. So let's go in. My guest today is Joe Ghalbouni, the president of Ghalbouni Consulting. Joe is my colleague from the Quantum Strategy Institute, and he works where quantum computing, artificial intelligence, and high-performance computing, HPC, intersect with real-world impact. Joe has a background in academia and the hedge fund industry, so he is the perfect expert to talk us through these complicated lanes. In his current work in consulting, he covers both technology and strategy. Joe speaks the language of researcher and technology, or research and technology, but also understands the priorities of executives who need clear return on investment and risk management. Welcome to Deep Pockets, Joe.
Thank you, Petra. Thank you for having me.
So first, let's get you properly introduced. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and also expand on your current role or roles, if you have multiple roles.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my journey in quantum back when I was doing my master thesis. So at the time, I had a great professor who was telling us about all these novel areas of research in physics, and quantum information was one of them. So I simply applied for an internship at the end of my second year of master's degree, and the adventure started from there. So from a master thesis to a PhD, and I got a PhD in quantum communication in 2013. So at the time, when you were speaking about quantum to the industry, no one would know what you're talking about, right? So that's why I continued my career in academia. I was also convinced in going into academia, not just because there was no opportunities in the industry. And I went back to my home country of Lebanon. So I did my PhD in France. I went back to my home country of Lebanon for about 7 to 8 years, where I got a position as an associate professor of physics, and I was able to start a quantum computing activity there from scratch. So that's something I'm very proud of, because now we have almost 9 to 10 students who got their PhD based on that momentum I created in quantum.
Wow.
Yeah, so I'm very happy about that, because at least, that was a way for us to be on the map, and also to be one of the first Arab countries to publish papers in quantum computing. So now we've seen that a lot of other Arab countries, particularly in the Gulf, have, are doing a lot of amazing work in quantum. But, I like to say we're still the first, even though, unfortunately, we didn't keep the momentum going. Um, so in 2021, back when the 2020 momentum in quantum computing happened in the industry, and a lot of people started to look at this technology, as getting out of the lab. Uh, I wanted to embark on that journey because I'm someone who loves hard challenges, and I felt that this technology is way too complicated to get out of the lab and go to the industry without someone being able to properly translate it, so to speak. And I found that there was an opportunity to join at Point 72 as an applied quantum computing researcher, and I thought, why not? And so, to be honest, I didn't give it much thought because I wasn't sure this was going to work out, but it did, so which was very
Can you
good.
tell us about Point 72?
Yeah, absolutely. So Point 72 is an asset management. So it's a hedge fund, and they are based out of Stamford, Connecticut, and also New York. This is where their main offices is, but they are spread around the globe. They have a very big office in Poland, one in the UK, one in France. They also are in Asia, so they're pretty much international. And at the time, there was an innovation team that was starting, and they were looking at different emerging technologies that could impact finance. And the quantum computing was one of them. So I applied to join them as their applied quantum computing researcher. It was a completely different world for me because I had never set foot in corporate before. I didn't know how corporate operated. In academia, we operate very differently than corporate. We are not bound by any deadlines. We are not bound by regulations, by production environments. We are a little bit freer, let's say, than the world of corporate. But
Yes.
nevertheless, I've really had a great opportunity to have a mentor, that helped me really do the transition properly and to have an environment that really empowered me to get on that journey. So I was extremely lucky because the world of hedge funds is not always easy, but I really had a very good guidance while I was there. And so we worked on quantum, both starting from education because we wanted to get people interested. And so that was the first challenge because as an academic, I would speak to people who are studying physics. So going to speak to people who don't have that background in a technology that is so complex meant that I needed to formulate my words differently. And the good thing is that we got a lot of momentum. So a lot of people showed up and were extremely interested with what we were presenting, which was great because I didn't expect that many people to be interested in quantum. And from there, from education, it started to be more and more discussions to doing POCs to starting, to think about how can we integrate quantum in
Can you, sorry, can you open POC, please?
Yeah, so proof of concepts.
Thank you.
Sorry. Yes. So to do proof of concepts, and now, of course, with quantum, when you want to go to a proof of concept to what we call a most valued product MVP, and then to go to production. For quantum at the time, keep in mind it was in 2021, but that's still valid today in the sense that if you want to take something into production, you would need machines that can be available almost 100% of the time, which is still something in the quantum ecosystem we are working on. So there wasn't really an idea about going into production, having something you can deploy in production, meaning people are using it every day. But nevertheless, it was first of all to show the value because there's a strong need to understand what are the use cases in finance that are going to benefit from quantum. And when we say what are the use cases, we're not speaking just about the categories, let's say optimization, because optimization is a category, or machine learning. We really want to tackle which parts in the optimization are going to be interesting. Also, it's the same thing when you say portfolio optimization, meaning a financial portfolio that you want to optimize. This is an umbrella of problems. There are many problems that fall under this category. What is it exactly that you are looking to solve? And so at the same time, while I was at Point 72, the ChatGPT moment happened. And so there has been, as we can see in a lot of industry, a lot of shift towards AI. Now, the good thing is that I was actually asked by my manager to step in and help for the internal deployment that we had at Point 72 for our AI models. And it helped me understand a little bit, or I would say more than a little bit, it helped me understand what does it mean to produce code at a hedge fund, to take things into production, to properly support people who are using the application. And let me tell you, it's a completely different world. So I got really a taste of what that means when something is in production. There's a profit and losses, a P&L related to it, where people are telling you, there's that much money that is going to trade decision that has to pass through these tools. And another one was the compliance issue, because the SEC was now started to look at AI as something that needs regulation, right? Like anything in finance. So these are things where you needed, for example, to keep your prompts secure in a cold storage up to 7 years, so that people can make sure they can audit at the right time. They make sure that decisions are not automated by an AI machine. It's still a human in the loop. So those are extremely important aspects that we needed to address in that space. And so after my journey at Point 72 in June 2025, I decided to part ways, because I wanted to keep doing quantum. There was much less interest there to do quantum. And that's where I started my own company, Ghalbouni Consulting.
Wow, that is a great story. Very inspirational, very on point with what we're discussing here. So thank you for letting us into your world, Joe. As we prepared for this interview, we had another call in our previous call. We started by discussing the role of the EU's Digital Operational Resilience Act, or DORA for short, which is a regulation introduced by the European Union to strengthen the digital resilience of financial entities. And obviously, as fellow QSIers, we explored how quantum technologies such as post-quantum cryptography, PQC, fit into the framework of DORA. But we quickly realized that for the wider audience, we need to pull back a little bit and paint a bigger picture of what's going on in financial institutions, how the new digital threats and proposed solutions affect the industry and consumers. So let's start, Joe, since I mentioned DORA, and this is the Government and Innovation podcast, let's start with the Digital Operations Resilience Act. Can you talk us through what it is, why it's needed, and tell our non-EU audience how it might even affect them?
Yes, absolutely. So I'll summarize what the Digital Operation Resilience Act, or DORA, is in 3 points. So first of all, a small definition. It's an EU regulation that requires the financial sector to build strong, unified resilience against cyber threats and information technology, or IT, disruptions. And in short, it ensures these 3 points: that financial entities such as banks, insurers, hedge funds can withstand and quickly recover from tech failures or cyber attacks. Second, it also requires that tech providers, for example, like cloud or software services that supply the financial sector, are also strictly regulated. And finally, that cybersecurity standards are harmonized across the European Union. Now, why this is extremely important? Because when you talk about finance, you obviously talk about regulations. And why did we have this discussion about the DORA Act and post-quantum cryptography? Because if I look at the very first point, it tells financial entities that they can withstand and quickly recover from tech failures or cyber attacks. So even though DORA by itself does not mention the word quantum, it kind of implies the whole workflow of PQC, right? Because if you want to withstand from a cyber attack, let's suppose you're using the RSA or ACC cryptography, which are known to be vulnerable by quantum computing. Imagine you're using them and they get hacked. So what's your solution? Well, your solution is to go to post-quantum cryptography. So even though it's not explicitly mentioned, it means that for you to remain compliant against these type of with this resolution, with this regulation, for you to remain compliant, you will need to move to PQC. Also, if I look at the second point, it tells you that tech providers that supply the financial sector are also strictly regulated. So, and a financial institution cannot say, if I rely on a third party, a cloud or a software service, well, it's up to them to do their job and address this. No, it's now up to the financial institution to verify that their data are not going to be vulnerable. So it's also up to them, if within the PQC, the post-quantum cryptography framework, or even other, to go and tell their third-party services, I need you to be compliant in these exactly, so that we can work together. And the harmony between all the European Union means that all the countries in Europe are following the same path. Now, to answer your question, how does that affect people outside the EU? So it affects them in two scenarios. One of them, if I take the example of Point72 or other companies which are US entities but have offices in Europe, it means that within Europe, at least they need to be compliant. It also affects them greatly outside of Europe, because if you are all using the same cloud services, now the US entity also has to choose a service which works both for Europe and the US. So that means that indirectly or even directly, it's affecting what they have to choose in terms of service providers. So that's one aspect of it. Another aspect of it is, if you're a service provider or a tech provider, the software provider or a tech provider, sorry, that is going to these financial institutions, wherever you are, you need to be cognizant that these are going to be asked for you. There's going to be full questionnaires and full audit that is going to be done on you to make sure that if you provide service to these institutions, you're still compliant based on the DORA Act, and maybe based on other regulations that might happen in the future.
Thanks. A lot of information there. And I'm going to put a link to the DORA Act on the show notes of this episode for the listeners. Yeah. So, as I mentioned in my intro, financial services need to be secure, interoperable, and legal. We covered legal, we covered regulation. Let's talk about secure. You mentioned that in your current role, you cover both ends of the spectrum, meaning you talk to technology vendors, let's say quantum AI or high-performance computing providers, about the needs of the financial companies. And then you talk to their clients, the financial companies themselves, about how these technologies really help them with keeping their businesses afloat. So in a sense, would you consider yourself a translator?
Yeah, absolutely. I consider myself a translator because, as you mentioned at the beginning of the call, I've been exposed to both worlds. So I've been exposed to the world of technology as much as I've been exposed to the world of business. So I do understand what the business expects, but I also understand what is it that the vendor can deliver. And so in that sense, it really helps me merge the gap between the existing gap between the two worlds, because they do not speak the same language.
Great. Yeah, that is so interesting. Also for me as a fellow consulting entrepreneur. So the third leg, integration or interoperability, is one of my favorite themes. My audience knows I keep making episodes about standards, even though I'm not sure my audience loves standards as much as I do. But Joe, talk us about integrating new systems. And we can take the post-quantum cryptography as an example, since we already spoke to that. Or you can take another example. How big of an effort it is to design new features or to tweak our existing equipment to be compliant with new regulations without breaking the architecture?
So I really love this topic just as much as you do, because this is really where the reality happens. And PQC is a great example, because today, if we look at the offering in products in post-quantum cryptography, if I think about quantum key distribution devices, which are hardware pieces that allows you to create secure keys for encryption based on quantum physics, they are way more mature than where quantum computers are today. Way more mature in the sense of integration, because when you are working with, let's say, network architectures, there's a certain way the flow of data is happening. There's certain ISO standards that you need to respect. There is certain cybersecurity, resilience, and protection that you need to respect. So introducing a whole new technology in that existing rack of technologies can be extremely challenging. The good thing with, for example, quantum key distribution devices, or QKD for short, is that there has been almost a 20 years journey to where we are today. And these devices have become extremely compatible with existing network infrastructures. So the whole integration within existing infrastructures is really something that requires one to understand, again, both worlds of the both ends of the spectrum. You need to understand exactly how things operate in IT and information security, but also how things operate at the technology level. And the reason why I think in quantum computing it's also extremely interesting is because today we do not have regulations for quantum computing. We have many different ways to build a quantum computer that various companies are looking at. We have superconducting, we have neutral atoms, etc. But we do not know which one is going to be the most regulated, or the one that is going to be regulated the earliest. The reason why I bring this is because today you can have among these technologies two or three of them which work very well, but only one of them that is going to be compliant, in the sense that one of them that is going to be scalable, reproducible, that is going to be resilient against any type of attacks, that is going to have its own blueprint of guidelines, its own blueprint of governance. And so that means that today, if you're a quantum vendor, you need to worry about this, because your machines can be very good, but might not be compliant or integrated in a way that enterprises are going to be using your product. And this is something I still do not see addressed as much as I would like to see personally for this to work. And we've seen, for example, very recently, a couple of days ago, that Google, who works in superconducting approaches, is now also investigating neutral atoms. So we ask ourselves, is it because of a technological bottleneck, or is it because of a regulation issue? So this will be interesting to see in the coming days.
Absolutely. I love it. And just for the audience, I'm sure that if you are interested in these questions, you can contact Joe and he will give you more information about even more detail. Okay, my last question today is very simple. Would you leave us with something uplifting? What makes you happy today, Joe?
So what makes me happy is that, a little bit of context on that. When I graduated high school, quantum physics was not something that I wanted to study, to be honest. Also, even physics, I wanted to go into music. I wanted to do a career into music, so completely different. But with time, I learned to really like what I do. So I still do music on the side just for fun, but I really started enjoying what I do. I'm someone who gives 150% to what I do. So I thought, I went to that career by default by choosing physics because, I was influenced a lot by my family because they're all in that domain. So I was like, you know what, I've chosen that. Let me go through this. But at the same time, I thought I wanted to do that job in a way that I would feel comfortable. And to me, feeling comfortable is having a lot of space to explore, because I'm a very curious mind. So I do not like to be bounded by, let's say, a specific task to do or a specific set of tasks, and not be able, to think outside of the box or to go in another direction, which I believe might be worth exploring. Also, the reason why I believe I can do that has to do with over 15 years of experience in that field. So I think, I'm not going to say I know everything, because I certainly do not. No one knows everything, and I have a lot to learn. But I believe that this gives me at least a little bit of, I would say, space to explore and say, I've seen how things have evolved in the past 15 years in that technology. This is where I think it would be interesting to look at. And today, with my consulting activity, I have the freedom to do that, and that's what makes me happy.
That's so beautiful. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
This has been Joe Ghalbouni, the president of Ghalbouni Consulting. Please follow him on LinkedIn, and I will put the link on the show notes. Thank you so much for coming to Deep Pockets, Joe.
Thank you, Petra, for having me. It was a pleasure.
You've listened to Deep Pockets with Petra Soderling, the show about government and innovation. If you liked today's episode, please subscribe, like, and share our show in your social media. It means a lot to me and to my guests. The wonderful music you heard is by a New Orleans Hall of Fame jazz icon Leroy Jones. Find this and other Leroy Jones tunes wherever you get your music. This podcast, as well as the recording of my audiobook, is done by Chris Elliott at Studio Aguse in south of France. Get in touch with Chris to book studio time in our beautiful village, and why not come and taste the natural local wines from La Robina Winery while you're here. À votre santé!
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.